Hey guys, happy early Monday morning, just after midnight. I wasn't going to do another FACTnet thing 2 days in a row. I want it to be interspersed, but it was a busy day on Sunday, and so I thought I would do this. I tried to make it a little bit more clear as to who is writing, like just at least putting a difference between the different writers. And with this, I'm going to start with a portion of the letter that was sent to the Keckles and Davis after we left. And then it's going to be followed by a journal entry that my daughter made, my oldest daughter, after we left, just right after we left, I believe, and about the same subject. And then we will go on to some FACTnet posts that were about that. So a very quick background. In December of 2003, a group of people, one of them being Dennis, who they broke off from NTCC. They did it right in a service. They stood up, walked out, said a few things. It was very crazy. Most of us did not know what in the world was happening. Dennis took these people and they started their own gig. And just in, it's 2024. I think it was the summer of 2022. You can look it up online about the FBI raids a church in Georgia and all over the country. That was House of Prayer, led by Dennis. If you type in DENIS, that's the group that splintered off from NTCC. And Dennis, by the way, was highly touted and praised by Davis. He learned a lot from Davis, and that can't ever be forgotten. Does it? He went to a whole nother level of obscene ways to prey upon the military and take advantage of them, robbing them. He robbed them. There was a lot going on. It was a time of turmoil and of not knowing really what the deal was at any time. You didn't know who was on the Lord's side and who was on Dennis's side, because of course to be in NTCC was to be on the Lord's side. And 2004 saw the spawning of FACTnet, and then George Jordan got up in a service. I think it was the beginning of 2005 in Graham, and so we're going to address that right now. That is a major issue in NTCC, is this extremist view of leaders. This is the portion, it's like a paragraph from the letter that was sent to Davis and the Keckles from us. It will begin to seem that I have some kind of grudge toward Reverend George Jordan. He is actually one of the most likable people alive, but that evening when he preached in Graham, I realized it must be in context. The Dennis thing was fresh in our minds. We felt we were under attack. Yet I am sure you realized as he was preaching that he was either divinely inspired or completely off his rocker. There was no room for any other option. And I believe you were very uncomfortable, not out of false humility, but because you clearly perceived that what he was saying could not be true, or, if it is, to say so is an open declaration that we are no different from the cults. He was making bold to state the case for Pastor Davis as being the man of God on earth. He placed the members of the general board and even the school of faculty on the same level with those who walked with the Lord on earth and saw him after he was risen. This was not based on any general theory of succession, that there must be those who are among us today that God uses like the original apostles, but rather upon the assumption that we are what God is doing, and if God is doing anything else, those people will come to our ministry for the fulfillment and or completion of their own experience in holiness, or else will become exactly like we are. And all of this is rooted in our belief that the NTCC holiness standard is God's holiness standard, that God saw compromise in churches that let women get away with cutting their hair, so he raised up a man to call sin what it really is, and here we are today. The coercion, obligation, and pressure are based upon one single factor, just as a lever needs a fulcrum. Personal leverage needs a fixed point upon which to operate. That fixed point, which allows for the built-in abuse of exaggerated authority, is our exclusive claim to righteousness based upon the holiness standard. And this is the journal entry from my daughter. First up, during the conference in Graham in February 2005, Reverend George Jordan preached on the night. He didn't preach very long. This was partly because he wasn't Davis, and nobody preached as long as he did, and he got everybody all riled up in the quote-unquote spirit, and we started singing pick-me-up songs. It must have been halfway through his sermon when he said one of the scariest things I've ever heard. He was up there behind the pulpit, running around and screaming in the microphone, his sleeves rolled up and a handkerchief in one hand for occasional dabbing of the brow. Davis was in his usual perch, a gold-leaf chair up behind the pulpit. So Jordan is yelling and saying things to get everybody all pumped up. Things like, "It's conference. Are you excited yet?" Always ending in a chorus of amen. I don't remember what he was even preaching about because he kept going off subject. At one point, he started talking about how much of a man of God Davis is. He was just going on and on, more than preachers usually did over the pulpit. I was just sitting there listening when he says it. His words were, Pastor Davis is an apostle, just as important as the 12, equal to the Apostle Paul, perhaps even greater, and it's possible Pastor Davis is one of the 24 elders around the throne as described in the book of Revelation. At this point in my life, I had just started to slowly lose my respect for Davis, but not completely. A few people said amen. These people, I am sure, were not even listening to begin with, and just uttered the interjection to make it seem as if they were into it. My jaw dropped, and I felt creepy chills. How could he say that? Where is he getting this from? I then looked to Davis for assurance that this is not going to go undealt with, and nothing, not even a blink. He just sat there, like usual, looking out over the congregation. I was in shock, complete and utter shock. I looked around to see if anybody else was having a similar reaction, especially first-time visitors. I couldn't tell. Well, I thought maybe Davis will say something afterwards or tomorrow night when he preaches. Surely he's going to address this. He did not. The next night he praised George Jordan for his great sermon. My Davis respect meter dropped so hard it broke. After that, I never tried to fix it. And now some FACTnet posts about this topic. Usually FACTnet veers off a little bit at times, and I tried to choose the ones that were pertinent. On May 15th, 2006, someone who's out of the organization put a quote from someone who went by the name LDR. I believe I know who that person was, and they were on the side of the organization, and they wrote about all the stuff on FACTnet. They wrote, all of this reminds me of the story of Korah in the book of Numbers. I think it is in chapter 16. If not, read the whole book. It may do you some good. He too rose up and spoke against the man of God, and guess what? The Lord put an end to all of his shenanigans. So stand back, people, and watch your step, for woe unto those that are not on the Lord's side. And then the response from someone who was out at the time. This kind of thing is clear evidence of what we've been saying all along. It should not go unheeded by the reader. It can be seen that in the mind of the poster, LDR, R.W. Davis has been exalted to the level of Moses himself. In the mind of the typical NTCC member, to be at odds with Pastor Davis is to be at odds with God. How can anyone reading these words doubt the validity of our issues with NTCC? How does it get any more plain than this? What about the other NTCC member who stated above that she is praying for us to return to the true church? Sirens should be going off in your minds, people. And here's a quote from someone happy to be part. And this person wrote on June 2nd, 2004, I am one who will make that stand and say that Pastor Davis is a modern-day Moses. God actually called him to build a Bible school for his glory so that men and women would have a place that they could learn of God without compromise. He does not call everyone like that. Moses was a man called of God to fulfill a great purpose. So is Pastor. It is only evident. You who are messing with him and the church God has called him to establish are just the same spirit that rose up against Moses. God is merciful, and that is why I've been trying to calm some of this mess down. You who are spouting off about this man of God, not the only man of God, but a man of God, you must beware. God will remember, and he is watching. Laugh at me, taunt me all you want, but I know by experience with him in his life, he is a man of God. One day you will see. The men of God are not to be messed with. I love my pastor. I love NTCC because God is still with us. And then in response to her, I'm not sure how to respond to this other than to say, this is what I would point to when suggesting that the emphasis on leadership and authority in NTCC is extreme. Those who have been following the discussions in this forum since the beginning will know that references to Pastor Davis as the Lord's anointed and imprecations against those who speak against him or his organization have been used frequently by loyal members and ministers of the church. I would like to know if Reverend Keckle or any others in the leadership of NTCC are prepared to admit that their organization promotes this type of mentality that is demonstrated in the above quotes. Obviously, none of these people thought this way before they became involved with NTCC, so where did they get it from? This is a quote from Keckle to those who were posting on FACTnet. You have mocked the office of the anointed and those that hold it. Shall you be guiltless? Answer biblically, you can't. You flatter yourself concerning your great intellect and articulation. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Say that Pastor Davis is of the devil. If you can't, then he is of God. If he is a man of God, you have a serious problem on your hands. And the person that Keckle said this to responded, perhaps it's not such a great mystery after all as to where it comes from. Meaning, where do they get this idea about Davis and about the men of God in the organization? Then this other person said, I'm not part of the leadership. This type of thinking isn't promoted. It's just as with any group or business where many people look up to the leader. Reverend Davis doesn't promote himself this way. In fact, since everyone here likes quotes, Reverend Davis said that anyone can do more for God than he has. Someone else answered that, said, yet we see that Reverend Keckle uses the same type of language and threats, evidencing the same mentality. You say that you're not part of the leadership. Does this mean you have not gone through their Bible school? And then Keckle responds that Davis doesn't promote himself that way and doesn't like others doing it either. And what was Moses anyway? And Moses verily was faithful in all his house as a servant. God was the lawmaker. Moses was a mere mediator, the meekest man on the earth, yet bold in leadership. Exalting himself to the level of servant surely is a lofty goal. Now, for those of us who were in the Bible school, both Olson and Keckle constantly told us that Davis was the first man up before the throne of God, and that we were all God's elite special forces. That's what we were told. And Davis was never a servant. Never was that man. If you believe the Bible, to have Davis equated with Moses is obscene. Because that man sat around in his house lounging, and I witnessed it many times, while other men of God on the board had to stand in a doorway and bring him his stuff, bring him his dry cleaning, bring him all his stuff, while he sat his carcass in a lounge chair doing what? We never know. He wasn't out soul winning. He wasn't doing anything. He was not a servant. He should have been that man who stood in the doorway in his socks, not allowed to walk in on the floor. Davis should have been doing stuff for him or for Bible school students who were working all day and in classes at night and in every stupid service and stupid soul winning, knocking on doors. Davis should have been washing their cars. He should have been mowing lawns. He should have been picking up their dry cleaning. That's what a servant does. Now back to FACTnet. That the mentality reflected in the above quotes is, and the quotes that are promoting the idea that Davis was just a Moses, he was a great man of God, is widespread in the church, especially among the ministry. It can't be disputed. Evidence of it is all over this forum. Sometimes it manifests more subtly and sometimes flagrantly. All of us who went through Bible school became imbued with it. Then why does he surround himself with people who do promote him that way? The men he has appointed to prominent positions of leadership do promote this mentality. Your own words are right there in front of you. The question is not whether he is anointed in some generic sense, and it is disingenuous to cast it as such. How long will you continue to blame Pastor Davis's ministers for what they learn at his institution? Here we have the person saying in response to Kekel, where Kekel says, "How long will you continue to despise NTCC members for following what they read in the Bible?" And this person responded to him, "I do not despise any members of NTCC. I was a member/minister myself for almost 10 years and bought into the whole bit. I do not believe that I was the distillation of evil for then preaching what I now reject. And I don't feel that way towards any current members. I think I was led astray, and that's what I think of those who remained ensnared. I made many friends while in NTCC, and some of them are still my friends today. It is possible to challenge a brother's thinking without despising him. Mike Kekel has eaten at my table and I at his. I dare say we ate better at his. I am not engaging him here because I despise this person. Indeed, I have fond memories of the man. If I or any of us did not believe that there was something good in him to appeal to, we wouldn't bother. While in Bible school, I sometimes heard Mike take shots at mentalities and attitudes that seemed off-kilter, and I recall thinking to myself, I'm glad he said that. Thus it seems to me that he knows and sees that some things are amiss. What I see here, however, is that instead of getting serious about questioning the environment that produces such mentalities and attitudes, he blames the ones that manifest them. Secondly, I don't think that the extremes which define NTCC are a result of following the Bible, as you say. There are many people with Bibles who read them, study them, and endeavor to live by them, yet who do not end up creating an environment like NTCC. There are other factors at work that generate such distortions, besides a desire to stringently follow the Bible, and those other factors are what most of us here are trying to bring to light. The one person asked another if they had been through the Bible school, and this person said, "Yes, I've been through the Bible school." Then the other person said, "Good, good. Can you name for me another church or organization that your leaders consider to be right? I'm only asking for one. Thank you." The person that was asked to name another church or organization that your leaders consider to be right, and I'm only asking for one, they answered, "The church is right," meaning the body of believers, not a name or specific church group. Just because someone attends a specific group doesn't mean that that person as an individual is right with God. It would be super duper cool if NTCC believed that, what this person just stated, but they do not. So this thread on FACTnet went kind of sideways for a little while, and then the original poster, the person who started the thread, wrote, "I would like to get this thread back on track, if at all possible. Mike Heckle, what did George Jordan mean when he preached recently at Graham that Pastor Davis was not just a man of God, but God's man, first up before the throne? My understanding is that you and Pastor Davis were both in attendance and that no retraction or qualification was ever presented in light of Jordan's statements. You stated earlier that Pastor Davis doesn't promote himself that way and doesn't like others doing it either. I asked why, then, he surrounded himself with people who do promote him like that, including Reverend Olson, who does it more than anyone. I anticipate an honest and thoughtful response. Thank you." This post is by somebody called You Fill in the Blank. This is from May 23rd, 2006. Mike Heckle, what did Reverend George Jordan mean when he preached recently at Graham? That Pastor Davis was not just a man of God, but God's man, first up before the throne. Anyway, I do remember a sermon that G. Jordan preached shortly after the church split. He said something about Reverend Davis being as good as Paul, etc., etc. He also said that Reverend Davis was the most righteous man living for God right now. He was saying that no man alive today is as godly as Reverend Davis. I know he said this. It stuck out in my mind because when he said that, I automatically thought it was a crock. I thought about other righteous men who I know of. I thought of Billy Graham and Larry Rice. I know these are TV people that I have never met, but I know more about their lives than I do about Reverend Davis. Anyway, the whole sermon was uplifting Reverend Davis and putting him in the same category as past biblical people. I don't even think there was a real sermon. It was 45 minutes of praise for a man. It really woke me up. All these people around me were amening and stuff. That's when I realized that some of these people do not really think for themselves. It was like I was the only one that found this to be weird. Someone else responded to all this by saying, "All I can say from personal experience was that I probably would have left NTCC a lot sooner if I was not scared that by not standing with R.W. Davis, thus the Lord's side, would mean me being a child of Korah. To say that that kind of thing is not promoted there, especially when messages to that effect are preached regularly to keep everyone in line, is absolutely not just a plain lie, but insane. Why then all the horror stories preached about people who left, and then they died or something terrible happened to them, as if to imply God judged them for not standing with the man of God, a.k.a. R.W. Davis? Heckle, for you to say that sort of stuff is not promoted there, there is no other way to say it other than that is a blatant lie." And then again, the person who started the thread wrote, "We used to sing a chorus in Bible school. I read it in the Bible, everything's gonna be all right. Well, I read it in the Bible." You know that one. Everything's gonna be all right. Yes, I read it in the Bible. Everything's gonna be all right. Be all right, be all right, be all right. One time, Reverend Heckle, while leading song service on a Sunday morning before the church was open to the public, changed the chorus to "I love Pastor and everything's gonna be all right." And the entire student body fell right in with him singing, I love pastor and everything's going to be all right. Well, I love pastor and everything's going to be all right. Be all right, be all right, be all right. I did not participate in this round because I was deeply weirded out and disturbed to see hundreds of people supposedly gathered to worship God standing there and singing about their pastor. It was one of those many incidents that I had to forcibly subdue in my mind in order to remain loyal, yet which I never forgot, even unto this day. Thus, when I say that Pastor Davis has surrounded himself with shameless sycophants who extol him beyond measure before the rank and file, I place Mike Keckle firmly among them. He cannot and will not answer for Jordan's behavior because he does the same thing himself. Roger Davis promotes those that promote him. And here's a quote by Olson. Brethren, this organization is Pastor Davis. And then Keckle comes back with, hey, a few questions since you finally gathered your courage. And I'd like to interject here. This is rich coming from a man who came on this forum anonymously with the moniker The Whirlwind and spewed lies and assumptions. This really, really is rich, but this is Mike Keckle for you. Let's pick back up with Mike. Extol beyond measure wasn't extolling anyone, so we take it that you don't love him, am I correct? I wonder which of you love RWD. Anyone? And then someone answered back, I'll be the first to say that I love RWD. I just think he's wrong. And then Linda Bowman said, I will be the second to say that I love RWD, and I also believe he is wrong. Loving someone has nothing to do with it. And then Keckle said, yes, it does, ma'am. My response to Mike believing if you love someone, you can't also disagree with them. How many people do you love in your life? Are you on board with everything they do? This is absurdity. Linda then wrote, Mike, I'm speaking for myself here. I can love someone even if I believe they are wrong. In my little way of thinking, it has nothing to do with love. But I am just a woman. What do I know? Then Vic Johansson wrote, the culture of NTCC doesn't permit loving disagreement. Any deviation from the party line is treated as personal rejection, even betrayal. I love everyone, including the misguided leaders of the org. I hope the best for them. And my belief is that their best will require change. Change may not be likely, but lack of confrontation renders it even more improbable. How many times were we taught by these same men that our worst enemy is the one who refuses to tell us the truth, right? We would be deficient in our love if we didn't try to challenge NTCC adherents toward a more noble path. And I say to that, that's it. That is exactly what they told us. Someone who loves you tells you the truth. Someone responded to Mike, the question is not whether anyone loves Pastor. The question is whether or not it is weird, to put it mildly, that you would lead the entire student body of the Bible school in church on a Sunday morning in a chorus of I love Pastor. It is the reader who must reconcile the facts with your denials of what is and what is not promoted concerning the man of God. I'll leave you at that right now. Mike never did, as far as I can find on FACTnet, he did not answer about George Jordan and some other things regarding Davis and how he was constantly elevated by Olson, by Mike, and others to a status that is cultish. For those of us who are out, we all have our different opinions because we are not, as we are constantly painted with a broad brush by Kinson and Keckle on purpose to be all of one huddled mass. They are the ones promoting a huddled mass of sameness with no individuality whatsoever. And so I'm sure we all have our ideas about whether or not Davis was elevated, whether or not Keckle and Kinson and others have talked about you don't talk about. To talk about the church, the group, the corporation is akin to touching the Lord's anointed and those who are in. Do you fit the description of someone who just, like Kinson said in service Sunday night, just last night, about he just heard things and he followed it, he just believed it blindly, like he just believed what he was taught. That was it. Their critical thinking is not allowed. You are not allowed to say, does this match up with what I read in the Bible? They are of the mind, if they tell you it does, it does. Don't question it, because then you're questioning God. Hey, have a great Monday. I hope you'll ponder these things. And I hope if you feel they resonate, if you're someone searching out a group of believers, this is not the place to go. If you're in the military, run very far away. I hope your Monday is filled with thinking on things, finding just a place to think, to allow your mind to bring to the forefront things it has been storing up for you, for that day when you will finally deal with it. I hope you'll deal with it. And as always, I am so appreciative of everyone who reads and leaves a comment or gets a hold of me privately. I'm just very thankful.